Hey Reddit, welcome back to r slash. Let me tell you a scary story about my doorbell ringing at midnight. I live out in the middle of nowhere, have no close neighbors, and the nearest house is 1/2 mile away. It's also in the opposite direction from the road, so it's really not possible for someone to accidentally get lost and end up on my driveway. Also, I do and have any streetlights, and there is no reason for anyone to be driving past my house at midnight anyway. It was 12:01 a.m. I was sleeping with my boyfriend in our bedroom at the back of the house when the doorbell rang. We were both startled awake. Obviously, we thought it was strange that someone would be at our door at that time, and when our phones weren't showing any notifications, we were even more confused. My boyfriend went downstairs to check it out, while I stayed in bed trying to listen for noises. He didn't say anything for a minute or two, so I started getting pretty scared. The doorbell only has a chime downstairs. It doesn't make a sound where I'm at. But then I heard him yell, "What the F?" I got even more scared. He came back upstairs and told me to get dressed and come see something funny. Apparently, there was no one outside. All the porch lights were off, but the motion sensor light turned on when whatever set the doorbell off approached the house. And there was clear footprints in the wet grass leading up to the door. There was no other signs of forced entry and nothing seemed to be missing. But it was weird that somebody would ring the doorbell and not actually try to come in. We checked the cameras. They were all facing the ground, which is what they usually do when they're triggered by motion. And the recording had already been overwritten. I thought it was probably some kind of prank. Someone probably ran up to the door and pressed the button before running off. The next morning, my boyfriend and I went out back to look for the footprints again. But after it rained overnight, they were washed away. I felt stupid. I couldn't stop thinking about how embarrassed I must have looked standing at my window, like an idiot trying to listen for noises, while my boyfriend was making a fool of himself at the front door. A couple days later, it happened again. I was lying in bed, scrolling through Reddit, when I heard the doorbell ring. I got up and walked to the window. It was dark, but I could see another set of footprints in the grass. And there was someone standing on my porch. A man was standing there holding his cell phone to his ear. I watched him walk down my driveway and turn left onto the road. I didn't call the police because I knew they wouldn't do anything. Plus, there wasn't any actual evidence of a crime. I didn't want them to think I was crazy. Every night for the next week, the same man would walk up to my front door, ring the doorbell, talk into his cell phone for a few seconds, then leave. My boyfriend and I kept checking the cameras, hoping to catch him doing something weird, or to get a good look at his face, but it never worked. He always seemed to know exactly when the cameras were triggered, and he always made sure that he was far enough away when he talked on his phone. On one of the videos, we finally managed to hear what he said, and it freaked us out. He said, "Yeah, it's the blue house with the white porch. Yeah, I know it looks abandoned, but I'm sure they'll be home soon. Yeah, just tell him I stopped by and hung around for a bit. Tell him I didn't mean to scare him last time." Then he hung up and continued walking around my yard. After he finished his phone call, he walked back down my driveway and turned right instead of left, like he did the other nights. The road goes straight for 1/2 mile until it dead ends at the highway. So he either turned around and went home the same way he came, or he drove off down the highway. One night I decided to go to the front door and wait for him. I wanted to confront him and demand to know what he was doing at my house. But he never showed up. The next week he stopped coming altogether. Then one night I heard the doorbell ring while I was lying in bed. I went to the window and saw a pair of footprints in the grass. But when I looked closer, I realized it was a child's footprints. I got even more scared. When I heard a knock at the door, I didn't recognize the pattern of knocks. It wasn't the usual 2 knocks for delivery or 3 knocks for a salesperson. I opened the door a crack and asked who was out there. A little girl was standing on my porch. She was small enough that her feet didn't touch the ground, and she was holding a teddy bear. She looked up at me and said, "Trick or treat." I almost screamed. My door was locked and the deadbolt was engaged. She couldn't have knocked it open on her own. And besides, it was the middle of the night. Kids aren't supposed to be out. I asked her if she was trying to trick me, and she shook her head. "Treat," she said. I hesitated. Should I open the door? What if she was trying to let someone else in? She looked so cute, I caved and gave her some candy. She said thank you, and walked away without even trying to come inside. And that's when I noticed her footprints in the grass. They were too small to be hers. When I went out to look, I found this doll sitting in the grass. It was a porcelain doll. I remember seeing one just like it in an old house I used to rent. The doll was the creepiest part of that place. I didn't want it here, so I took it and threw it in the bushes. That was the last straw. Put up a security system and cameras. Then the creepy stuff stopped. I don't know if it was the cameras or the fact that Halloween was over. Maybe the guy didn't like my attitude when I answered the door. Maybe he thought I was going to call the cops or something. But it hasn't stopped me from wondering why he did it. Why would he visit my house every single night? Was he waiting for me to answer the door? Why would he call someone and tell them to tell me that he stopped by? What did he want me to know? Why did he bring his kid along? So yeah, Reddit. That's the story of how my doorbell kept ringing at midnight. It hasn't stopped me from wondering why. That's all. Thanks for listening, and bye.